My dad left me a box of bolts, but the lawyer said, "This is worth millions." That was the last thing I expected to hear after his funeral. Everyone else walked out of the church like they were leaving a boring meeting. No tears, no wailing. Just polite nods and whispers about how he was quiet, but decent. My name is Jacob Holloway, and if you're watching this, it's because you've heard the story about the man who inherited a fortune disguised as junk. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a house that didn't echo with laughter. The walls absorbed sound like they were trained to keep secrets. My father, William Holloway, wasn't a cruel man, but warmth was a language he never learned. He was a former aerospace engineer who retired early, not because he wanted peace, but because, I think, he wanted to build in silence. His tools weren't in drawers. They were sacred, suspended above his bench like relics. Spiral notebooks stacked like towers. Circuit diagrams wallpapered the garage. Every birthday, without fail, he'd hand me a box. Not a toy, not a card, a box filled with bolts. "Someday, you'll understand," he'd say. At 6, I thought he was teasing me. At 10, I thought he was broken. At 17, I stopped caring. The only photo of all three of us sits on my desk now. Mom smiling, me holding her hand, and Dad staring somewhere off camera. She died when I was 6. After that, Dad folded inward, like a blueprint he'd grown tired of redrawing. He never attended a parent-teacher night, never helped with homework. But every night, I'd hear the hum of his machines through the floorboards, like lullabies made of gears. By 18, I packed a bag and left. Moved to Chicago, slipped into the world of numbers and profit margins. Finance made sense. Emotions didn't. I called once a year, on his birthday. Our conversations were brief. "You doing okay? Still working? Be well." He never said, "I miss you." And I never asked him to. A month ago, he died in his sleep. The coroner said it was peaceful. I took the train home alone. The funeral was a formality. A few old colleagues mumbled about his genius. A neighbor told me he once fixed a lawnmower with duct tape and copper wire. I said nothing. Not because I had no words, just none that felt honest. When the lawyer summoned me to the office, I expected paperwork, maybe the deed to the rusting house. Instead, he handed me a mahogany box. Polished, heavy, latch sealed with brass. Inside, a dozen bolts. Smooth, etched, unfamiliar. I laughed, until the lawyer said, "Mr. Holloway, your father held 12 patents that were never released to the public. He encoded them into these." Encoded? They're vaults. He pioneered a form of mechanical encryption, microscopic layering inside solid-state objects. Each bolt contains technical blueprints hidden in physical architecture. I blinked. "Why bolts?" He smiled. "Because no one would steal something they didn't understand." There was also a note. "Jacob, this is my life's work. What you do with it, that's yours." And just like that, the past I'd buried opened wide. The old key still worked. I stepped into the house I hadn't seen in 15 years. The hinges moaned like they resented my return. Dust veiled every surface. The smell hit me first: metal, oil, aged paper. Like someone had bottled time and let it sit too long. The mahogany box sat under my arm, heavier now that I knew what it carried. I set it gently on the workbench, next to a stack of yellowing blueprints. Something crunched underfoot. I looked down. A photograph. Me at age 9, grinning, holding up a crooked metal sculpture made of scrap. Dad beside me, staring at the camera like it had offended him. His hand rested awkwardly on my shoulder, as if posing required instructions. There was a manila envelope on the desk. Thick, wax-sealed. My name on the front. To Jacob. I opened it. Inside were 3 things: a hand-drawn map of the house, a flash drive, and a letter written in my father's crisp, mechanical handwriting. "Jacob, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I didn't teach you what I should have. That's on me. But I left you tools. This isn't an inheritance, it's a responsibility. Each bolt contains one design. You'll need the scanner downstairs to decode them. I built it from scratch. Don't take it apart. You're not alone. There are people who suspect. If they find out what you have, they will come. That's why the lab is shielded. Only use the flash drive there. No Wi-Fi. No connections. Stay inside the Faraday shell. What's inside these bolts could reshape the world. That doesn't mean it should. You'll have to decide that for yourself. I never doubted your mind. I just didn't know how to reach your heart. Love you, in the only way I knew how. Dad." My chest tightened. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I followed the map. The basement door creaked open like a trapdoor in a Gothic novel. Downstairs, everything was just as I remembered, except now it felt like a vault. The far wall had been rebuilt. Metal plating, conduits, and vents. In the center, a machine the size of a desk hummed softly, waiting. Above it, a scanner cradle shaped perfectly for the bolts. I took a breath. Inserted the flash drive. The screen flickered. Authorization, W. Holloway. User override, J. Holloway. Ready to skin bolt 1. With trembling hands, I picked the first bolt and placed it in the slot. The scanner chirped. Lines, shapes, blueprints unfolded in layers. Project, Polyphase Vortex Energy Harvester. My father's voice echoed in my head. Energy pulled from movement. Constant, infinite, clean. I stared. It wasn't science fiction. It was real. And it worked. The bolt clicked out of the scanner. The screen went black. Ready to skin bolt 2. I stepped back. The ground beneath me didn't shake, but the world had already shifted. And I had 11 more to go. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there in the basement, surrounded by my father's ghosts, the quiet kind, the ones etched into wires and half-erased equations. The air was cold, but my palms sweated as I stared at the bolts. 11 metal seeds, each holding something vast and unknown. I didn't know where to begin, so I didn't. I needed someone. Not just someone smart, someone I trusted. That's when I called Sarah. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since grad school. Back then, she was the only person who ever challenged my theories, the only one who called my bluffs. We once spent an entire weekend trying to build a hydrogen engine out of junkyard parts. It caught fire. We laughed. Then life split us up like poorly mixed chemicals. When she answered my call, her voice was cautious. Jake, I need your help. Pause. Are you in trouble? Yes. Another pause. Then, text me the coordinates. She showed up in under 4 hours. Black boots, denim jacket, her hair shorter than I remembered. Same sharp eyes. She stepped into the lab and let out a low whistle. So this is where your dad disappeared to. I showed her the bolt, the scanner, the blueprint. I didn't have to explain much. She understood before I finished. This is real, she murmured, zooming in on the design. Jake, this could power entire cities with no fuel. No emissions. Nothing. Yeah. She looked up at me. And you've got 11 more? Yeah. We scanned Bolt 2, a desalination unit that required no filters, just magnetic oscillation. Bolt 3, a self-repairing polymer that regrew when damaged. Bolt 4, aerial turbine wings with near-zero drag. Sarah ran her hands through her hair. If this gets out, every energy company on the planet will try to own it. Or bury it. That's what I'm afraid of. A sudden thump upstairs. We froze. I killed the monitor. Sarah grabbed the bolt case. I moved to the shadows, listening. Another thump. Footsteps. Too heavy for wildlife. Too slow for a neighbor. We heard the doorknob rattle. Sarah mouthed, "Back exit?" I nodded. We slipped through the service tunnel Dad had carved behind the tool racks. Crawled past old generators, broken bikes, and coils of wire. When we emerged into the night, the stars were swallowed by clouds. We didn't speak. Just ran. Back at the trailhead, Sarah turned to me, breathless. Who the hell would come for this already? I shook my head. I don't know. But someone knows what he was building. She looked at the case in her arms. Then we need to get this out of here. Now. I stared at her. Are you still in? Her grip tightened. I was in the moment I saw your father's signature. We didn't go back to the house. We didn't even sleep. We got in her car and drove toward the only person I knew who might be able to help us decode the rest without triggering global panic. His name was Peter. He owed me a favor. And he owed my father everything. Peter's lab sat inside a defunct airplane hangar outside Syracuse. Once a maintenance bay for decommissioned fighters, it now smelled of soldering flux and espresso. The words "keep out" were stenciled across the front in 4 languages. We parked beside a gutted van and approached cautiously. Sarah knocked twice. Then once more. A pause. A click. The door creaked open, revealing a barrel-chested man with wiry gray hair and arms inked with equations. "Jacob Holloway," he said with a half-smile. "Didn't think I'd see you again." He noticed Sarah, then the case. His expression shifted. "Is that?" I nodded. 12 of them. He stepped aside. Inside, the hangar was alive. Drones buzzed on suspended wires. Old computers blinked amber. A Tesla coil arced silently in the corner like a sleeping dragon. Peter led us to a workbench lined with shielding. We placed the bolts carefully. He scanned the first 4 with surgical precision. His eyes widened. Your old man wasn't just tinkering. He was rewriting engineering language. Sarah tapped a nearby screen. He stored the blueprints inside the physical structure, like genetic code. Peter looked stunned. We're not just talking energy or materials. This is convergence tech. Physics, biology, computation, all fused. Then we scanned Bolt 5, and everything stopped. The display lit up with cascading neural diagrams, synaptic pathways, real-time interfaces, project, direct neural integration. Sarah read aloud. This would allow a human brain to control machines, without intermediaries. Peter whispered, no wires, no interface, just thought. I felt cold. Peter shook his head. This isn't innovation. This is evolution. We scanned 3 more. Each one was bigger than the last. A soundless turbine that worked on air pressure. A cloaking field based on heat deflection. A lattice that could repair itself at the molecular level. And then, Peter's system pinged. Someone had attempted a trace. Encrypted signal just bounced off our firewall, he said. Military grade. Came from DC. Disguised, but clumsy. Sarah swore under her breath. They're watching you. Peter grimaced. I've kept this place off the grid for 15 years. That ping wasn't for me. It was for you. He handed me a burner phone. Get out. Don't take your car. Wipe your devices. Head north. You'll need cold air, thick trees, and no signal. I grabbed the bolts. Sarah packed the scanner. Peter shut down every system manually. As we left, he stopped me. Jake, he said, this isn't about whether people deserve this tech. It's about whether they can survive it. Outside, the sky was already paling with dawn. We drove north. No GPS. No music. Just the sound of the road and our breathing. Sarah looked at me. Where are we going? I answered without thinking. My dad had a cabin in the Adirondacks. Built it himself. No power. No signals. Just isolation. Perfect, she said. The bolts sat in the back seat like sleeping gods. We didn't speak again until we saw the snow. The cabin looked like something carved out of the woods by hand, because it was. My father built it after my mother died. I never visited. I always thought it was his retreat, a way to hide from the world that had stopped making sense to him. Now it was our refuge. Snow blanketed the trees, softening every sound. The solar panels were buried. The generator rusted over. That was fine. We needed silence more than light. Sarah checked the satellite blocker while I secured the perimeter. The cold bit through my gloves. Every crack of a branch felt like a shot fired. We brought only what we needed. The bolt case, the scanner, notes. Peter's burner phone was dead by then, and we had no intention of charging it. The first night, we didn't sleep. We took turns watching the tree lean. The second night, we decrypted Bolt 9, and everything changed. The design was titled Localized Temporal Drift Field. It wasn't theoretical. My father had built it, tested it. According to his notes, he had once activated the field around a hospital room. The patient, my mother. I stared at the diagrams, disbelief clawing up my throat. Sarah read aloud the technical specs, her voice trembling. If correct, the field compresses time inside the radius. You could experience hours while outside. Only seconds pass. I opened a secondary folder. My father's journal. I used it to try to save her. I thought if I could buy enough time, I'd find a way to stop the cancer. I lost track of time inside. When the field collapsed, she was already gone. Sarah covered her mouth. I broke the neurological limit. Was unconscious for days. But I knew then, time could be manipulated, but never controlled. The notes were manic, diagrams drawn over each other, equations scratched out and rewritten in red ink. And at the bottom, if Jacob finds this, tell him I'm sorry I tried to play God. Tell him I know better now. We sat in silence. Then came a blinking alert from the old motion sensor by the trail. 3 heat signatures. Footsteps. They'd found us. Sarah locked the bolt case. I grabbed the scanner. We fled out the back, down the slope, under a rock face my father had hollowed out decades ago. The cold was blinding. The silence, absolute. We ran until our lungs burned. We didn't stop until we reached the lake. Frozen. Empty. She turned to me. Where now? I answered, voice shaking. We find David. She didn't ask who that was. Just nodded. David was my father's brother, though they hadn't spoken in years. A war of ideals had split them. One chose exile and silence, the other chose shadows. But David was the only one my father ever trusted with his inventions. He lived deep in the Vermont woods, off a gravel road so forgotten it wasn't on any map. We hiked the last mile on foot, breath visible in the frozen air, boots crunching over pine needles. His cabin was smaller than my father's, but better fortified. Steel shutters, motion sensors, the smell of old metal and firewood. He opened the door before we knocked. Gray beard, stormy eyes, flannel shirt over body armor. He held a shotgun, but pointed it down. "Jacob," he said. "Uncle David." He nodded at Sarah, then stepped aside. Inside, we laid out the bolts. His eyes flicked from one to the next. "Did he leave a note?" I handed him the scanned journal entries. He read in silence, then whispered, "So he did it." He finished 9. Sarah paced. "We need to go dark. And we need answers. Who's tracking us?" David leaned back, folding his arms. "Government black sites. Private think tanks. Everyone's heard whispers. Most thought your dad was a myth. But someone intercepted the signal from Peter's lab. That was your leak." He stood and crossed the room, opened a safe hidden behind a torn map. Inside, he retrieved a small velvet pouch. Opened it. "Bolt 10. Your father sent me this 6 months before he died," David said. "Told me to keep it until you showed up. Said you'd know when it was time." I held it like it was a heartbeat. The scanner accepted it instantly. The screen came alive. "Project Entropy Kernel, the final fuse." Sarah gasped. "This isn't a bolt. This is a failsafe." David spoke gravely. "The entropy kernel resets artificial entropy, pollution, digital sprawl, economic imbalance. But it doesn't do it selectively. It wipes infrastructure. Global. Soft reboot." I stared at the specs. It was like watching a doomsday clock tick forward. Sarah read aloud. Projected rollback, 75 to 100 years. Estimated survival rate, 4%. My stomach turned. He built this. David's voice cracked. Only because he thought someone else eventually would. And he'd rather it be guarded by blood than by strangers. We shut the scanner down. No backups. No wireless. That night, we didn't speak much. I sat outside, watching the stars blink behind clouds, wondering if I was staring into a sky that might soon forget electricity ever existed. Before dawn, a single thought repeated in my mind. The choice isn't between power and peace. It's between legacy and survival. The next morning broke with wind that rattled the shutters. I barely slept. David was already up, boiling water over a wood stove. I scanning a grainy satellite printout he somehow got from an offline feed. "They're moving," he said without turning. "Small team. Looks like 3 vehicles. They're not using roads." Sarah leaned over his shoulder. "How far?" 2 days out. Maybe less. We had to act. David cleared the kitchen table, spread out a map. "There's a site. Your dad and I built it before you were born. A fallback. If anything ever went wrong." He traced a route into the Appalachian Mountains. "This place is different. Not a lab. A bunker. It's where he hid the rest." "The rest?" I asked. "Everything he never wanted even you to see." Sarah was already packing. "What's inside?" David's eyes darkened. The kernel was the last invention, but the first was a door. The drive took 18 hours. We switched cars twice. Slept in turns. At one point, we ditched off-road and walked a mile through thick forest to avoid a drone. Sarah jammed their signals with a pulse scrambler from Peter's backups. By the time we reached the ridge, the world felt quieter, like we'd stepped into the shadow of something ancient. The bunker entrance was hidden beneath a false rock face, mechanically lowered by pressure triggers embedded in the ground. David entered a sequence on an old steel dial. The rock groaned, shifted, opened. Inside, darkness. Then lights, soft, warm, golden like candlelight. The inner chamber held shelves, monitors, and a single platform with a cylinder in the center. Matte black. No seams. Sarah exhaled. "Is that?" David nodded. "The kernel you saw before was a prototype. This is the final build." I stepped forward. A low hum vibrated through the air. The closer I got, the more it felt like standing next to a nuclear thought. A console activated. My father's voice, older than I remembered, filled the chamber. "Jacob, if you're hearing this, it means you've made the choices I couldn't. You've seen what these designs can do. But there's one thing left, truth." The screens flared. Footage. Diagrams. Communication records. A transmission. A signal hidden in cosmic radiation. Buried data inside background noise. Sarah stepped closer. This came from space? No, I said slowly. It came from time. The display decoded into images, schematics similar to the bolts, but labeled in our language. Our math. Dated. 40 years in the future. David stood silent. My father had been intercepting signals from a possible future. He hadn't just invented the bolts. He'd translated them. And now, we weren't the only ones who knew. The bunker's proximity alarm shrieked. David grabbed the emergency console. They're here. Sarah drew her weapon. I secured the kernel into its vault case. We weren't just carrying technology anymore. We were carrying a warning. David hit a red switch under the console, and a hidden panel clicked open with a metallic sigh, a passage carved through layers of bedrock. Cold air rushed out like the earth exhaled. No time, he barked. Go. Sarah dove in first, her boots scraping against the metal rungs as she descended into darkness. I followed with the kernel vault strapped tight to my back, hands trembling from adrenaline. David came last, sealing the hatch with a manual override that hissed and groaned. The passage was narrow and steep, lit only by dim emergency strobes embedded in the rock. We moved fast, boots slapping wet stone, the echoes of shouts and clanging metal following behind. The enemy had breached the perimeter. The tunnel opened into an underground ravine, and at the edge, a drop. 12 feet, jagged rock below. David didn't hesitate. He jumped. Sarah followed. I threw the vault down, then leapt. We landed hard, tumbling into snow and moss. No broken bones, just bruises and panic. Behind us, the bunker detonated. Not with fire, but collapse. A directed implosion. Dad had built it with one rule: leave no trace. We sprinted through the trees. Thick forest clawed at us. Pines loomed like cathedral columns. Our breaths fogged the air. Each step sent ice cracking beneath our boots. We were ghosts now, hunted by shadows we couldn't see. David led us north. The terrain grew steeper. No roads. No trails. Only the line in his memory and the fading light. After hours of climbing, we reached a narrow crevasse. Inside, a cabin, camouflaged by rock and snow. A dead zone. No signal, no power lines, no footprint. Built by hand decades ago. We sealed the door behind us and collapsed. It took until the second night before we opened Bolt 11. There was no schematic. No diagram. Just a file. My father's face appeared on the screen. Gaunt. Tired. But determined. If you're seeing this, I've either failed or I've succeeded in buying you time. These bolts are not mine. I didn't create them. I deciphered them from echoes embedded in the background radiation of the universe. A signal hidden in chaos. A map left behind. He paused, eyes heavy. They're not just designs. They're stories. Memories. Caution signs. Not all of them agree. Not all of them are kind. But they are inevitable. He leaned forward. I built the entropy kernel because I feared what these messages implied. That someone, someday, might use them wrong. The kernel is not a weapon. It's a circuit breaker. A reset. If things spiral beyond return, it will give humanity a second chance. A harsh one, but a chance. David was silent. Sarah turned away. I couldn't breathe. My father hadn't just built the bolts. He'd built a legacy of restraint. Sarah finally whispered, he built a choice. We sat in that frozen silence for a long time. Then, 3 sharp knocks. I froze. Not rushed. Not urgent. Just firm. Rhythmic. Calculated. David raised his shotgun. Sarah checked the case. I approached the door slowly. Then a voice. Female. Calm. Not familiar. Jacob Holloway. We don't mean harm. We were allies of your father. The world isn't ready for what he made. But you might be. We'd like to help. Sarah's hand went to her weapon. David narrowed his eyes. Equinox, he muttered. I didn't move. Outside, the snow kept falling, and everything held its breath. The door creaked open slowly. I kept one hand near the vault case. David had his shotgun raised. Sarah's finger rested just beside the trigger. 3 people stepped inside. The woman who'd spoken, early 40s, white coat, eyes sharp as cut glass. Behind her, a man in tactical gear, face unreadable, and another woman with a silver laptop clutched to her chest. My name is Elena Reese, the first woman said. We represent the Equinox Initiative. We don't want the kernel. We want to make sure it's never used. David didn't lower his gun. Prove it, Sarah said flatly. Elena gave a slight nod. She reached into her coat, slow, practiced, and pulled out a thin device. It unfolded like origami into a holographic screen. The screen flashed a logo, a stylized eclipse surrounded by 12 stars. This initiative began in 2034. It wasn't public. It wasn't democratic. It was necessary. She pointed to the data. These signals your father intercepted. He wasn't alone. We've been tracking them for decades. But he was the first to decode them. The first to build. The silver-haired tech flipped open the laptop. A list of dates appeared. Names. Locations. Sarah stepped closer. These are Bolt Echoes, Elena confirmed. People who found fragments. Most destroyed them. A few tried to sell. One tried to patent a design. He died 2 days later. We don't kill people, Jacob. We contain chaos. David lowered his shotgun an inch. Not fully. Just enough. I looked at Elena. What happens now? That depends on you, she said. Your father didn't leave behind a weapon. He left a decision. We can protect you. Or, we can let others find you. Sarah turned to me. They want us to give it up. No, Elena interrupted. We want you to guard it, with us. There are more like you. People who understand that power without principle is ruin. I looked down at the vault. The weight of 10,000 futures sat in that case. What if we say no? I asked. Elena didn't blink. Then we walk away. But they won't. The ones tracking you. They won't stop until you're either used or erased. David stepped back. Let's say you're telling the truth. Let's say Equinox is real. What's your endgame? She smiled. To outlive temptation. To survive long enough that this knowledge becomes safe. Sarah locked eyes with me. Your call, she whispered. I thought of my father. Of the bolts. Of that final message. Not all futures are kind. And I said, then let's make one that is. 3 months passed. We didn't disappear. We erased ourselves. No phones. No signals. No trail. Equinox helped, but only to a point. The rest was on us. Sarah and I settled in a remote fjord near the Arctic shelf. We rebuilt the vault beneath reinforced tungsten and glacial sediment, 3 miles from the nearest satellite ping. The kernel was buried, protected by encryption and cold silence. David stayed behind, working with Equinox. His last words to me, don't let it haunt you. Let it teach you. We decoded the remaining bolt. Not a weapon, not a tool, a message. It read, every civilization meets a mirror. Most look away. Few survive the reflection. Choose wisely. I etched it into stone. Sometimes I wake in the night, sweat freezing on my back, dreaming of cities built on those bolts, of machines that never stop thinking, of signals that call back, not forward. But then Sarah's hand finds mine, and the world steadies. We started teaching. A small community. Off-grid thinkers. Builders. Healers. Not to spread the knowledge, just to grow wisdom that could one day bear it. One morning, a child asked me, what are those metal things in the glass vault? I smiled. They're seeds, I said. But we're not ready to plant them yet. The sun never fully rises here. Just a long, soft gold that kisses the snow. That's how I remember my father now. Not in steel, not in silence, but in light. My name is Jacob Holloway, and I chose not to save the world. I chose to give it time.